What is up, Aimers? Welcome to this Top 8 ProQuest Plus Riptide Blitz deck tech. I got top 8 with this at the ProQuest Plus in Barcelona at the weekend. As you might be able to hear, I'm a little bit ill, but I will try my best to go through this. I'm going to go through the deck, explain like the choices and stuff, and then at the end I'll give a tournament recap as well. So yeah, hero's Riptide. He is, I think, even better in Blitz because his second hero ability basically takes away half, 50% more health. So the traps are a lot more effective, which makes him more effective. Equipment-wise, we are running Barbed Castaway for the bow. It's the only bow in the deck. For the only headpiece, we've got New Horizons. We've got two chest pieces. That is Fiona Spring Tunic and Manta der Meerstief, also known as Trench of Sunken Treasure. The one arm piece I'm playing is Long Draw Half Glove. For boots, we've got Perch Grapplers and the Null Rune boots, and then I've also got two quivers, Quiver of Abyssal Depths and Enchanted Quiver. So let's talk about Barbed Castaway. The main reason this bow is good is not because it's powerful. It is flexible and it lets you take advantage of some very strong arrows, and also no one really expects this, so it kind of, you get that surprise factor on people as well. So the fact that you can pitch to load in your opponent's turn makes you very good going second, and it means you can play a few interesting instants as well, because now you can use the floating resources that you may play from an Oasis to load or give an aim counter, which is a much more efficient way of giving aim counters or loading the bow, as opposed to just paying a whole card to do that one action. New Horizons is the only helmet because I don't see why you'd ever play any other helmet. If you just use that extra arsenal slot one more time in a game, that's like the same value you'd get from a Crown of Providence or other helmets that people use in this slot. However, we're quite a tanky deck. These games go long, so you're going to be using that extra arsenal slot many times in a game, and it will come in handy because we've got quite a low arrow count in this deck. So you want to be able to sandbag stuff in there. When it comes to two chest pieces, Tunic is the main one. There's like a bit of I'd say it's a misconception about Blitz where they go, oh, you're on half life, so the game only lasts 3 turns. That maybe used to be the case, and that might be the case if you are in a pure gas aggro mirror, but it's not the case for this deck. I'd say most of my games went to second cycle and I got multiple uses out of the Tunic. The reason I run Tunic in this is because it just really helps fix the cost curve of the deck, basically. You need to pay to put an aim counter in this deck, and paying a whole card to put an aim counter on, say, a Stone Rain is a terrible rate. So doing that with just a free Tunic counter instead means you can play much bigger hands, block more. It just solves the deck. It's just, you need it, I think. The Trench is in here because I respect Wizard still. There's quite a lot of Wizard in this format, and so we run the Trench. If I am up against a Runeblade though, I elect to run the Null Rune boots instead of the Trench because I just value the one Tunic resource a lot better. It just means you can keep stuff in arsenal, like if you ponder a Stone Rain and then you have to block out, then you can just give it an aim counter, wait till the next turn. It's just really good value. The Trench is fine as well into the Wizard matchups because you kind of want to cycle faster. The deck is it's got a lot of traps, and so being able to cycle out those traps from your arsenal in a matchup where you're not getting attacked is very important. Now, Long Draw is the only arm piece. I think this is the best arm piece we have available to us. It's Battle Worn 1. It unclogs your arsenal for free once in a game, which is even more powerful in Blitz because even though they're not 3 turns long, the games are shorter, and it just gives you an extra buff as well, basically. So, super strong card. It punishes your opponent for maybe taking a setup turn. It just guarantees that you can send something back. The Perch Grapplers are in here because it's got the number 2 in the bottom right corner. You can sometimes use the other effect. I did in my game 1. I sent a double Dominate arrow turn using the Perch Grapplers effect. I still lost, but it was cool. And the Null Rune boots, again, is for the Runeblades and for the Wizards. Next we have the Quiver of Abyssal Depths and the Enchanted Quiver. The Abyssal Depths Quiver is only in here, well, it's always in here unless it's an Arcane matchup. I think in Barbed Castaway, the Abyssal Depths Quiver is by far the best quiver because in normal Riptide decks, you are just getting back arrows that don't have any sort of evasion, and so it doesn't help you stop getting fatigued unless you're down to the last 3 cards, both you and your opponent down to the last 3 cards in your deck, in which case there's probably somewhere you could have played a lot more efficiently and just not to do it in the first place. But with Barbed Castaway, when you use Abyssal Depths, you get back 2 Dominate arrows, which really does help close out a game. And then the Enchanted Quiver, this is just in for all Rune Blades and Wizards. It's basically an extra 2 life in most matchups, and it works so well with Barbed Castaway because you can just, again, sandbag that arrow in there and still use the bow. I would say that though, one thing to note is that against Aurora, I don't really use it to get the 2 life. I usually save it for when they have Channel Lightning Valley up, because that means I can send attacks and not leave anything floating in case they have the Sigil of Suffering, because this just covers the Sigil of Suffering. So I really like it for that. Yeah, so that's all the equipment. I'll move on to the main deck. So for the arrows, we have 2 copies of Battering Bolt, 2 copies of Endless Arrow, 2 copies of Searing Shot, 2 copies of Drill Shot, 2 copies of Murky Water, 2 copies of Stone Rain, 2 copies of Intoxicating Shot, and just 1 copy of Bolt and Shot. These are all the arrows I'm running. Just a quick disclaimer, I built this deck at like 2 AM the night before when I was quite intoxicated. I had a few intoxicating shots. So the deck is actually quite low on arrow count, which I tried to mitigate a little bit, but I was playing into Zen and I just could not beat that matchup. Like, Zen is horrible with Zephyr Needles, so the only way I found to beat Zen consistently was to add more traps at the cost of buffs and arrows. It did work out, but it does mean you have to be a bit careful. So we've got 2 Battering Bolt in here just because its effect is really relevant into the MST heroes. I don't know, it's just the most relevant it's ever been, to be honest. And pitching a blue to pay for your Battering Bolt and fire it is still a 2-card 6, which is alright, it's not too bad. 2-card 6 with a good on hit is like sending a CNC, so that's fine. Endless Arrow, Searing Shot, and Drill Shot are your best kind of unconditional effect 0 for 4 arrows. Drill Shot, being able to give it the aim counter is relevant, especially in the early game, because you either get tempo by taking more cards, or you get rid of your opponent's armor, which is amazing because you want your dominates to get through. Searing Shot's just like your best value Codex target, just like the 1-card one, unless your opponent has armor. And Endless Arrow is, what's Endless Arrow? It's Snatch, that draws Snatch and blocks 3. We're not running too many buffs in this deck, so running a 0-cost arrow that you can load into your arsenal from playing a trap is very, very strong. Now, the 2 arrows, Stone Rain and Murky Water, these are the 2 reasons, and basically the only reasons, to play this style of deck. They both get Dominate if you give them a name counter and just force through an insane amount of damage. Murky Water is probably the scarier one for your opponent to face, and you don't need the Tunic counter up because if you pitch a blue for it, that's still a fine rate because you're going to pay 2 to shoot it anyway. With Stone Rain, I tend to only like giving the aim counter to it if Tunic is up, or if I've got like a Deadeye and a yellow in hand. Like Deadeye and Stone Rain and Seek and Destroy is like, whoa, the perfect combo. But yeah, basically the way you win with this deck is you chip your opponent down with Trap Pings, and then you just want to set these arrows up with Dominates and just like smack your opponent down. It kind of feels like you're playing Icelander, because once your opponent gets to that kind of 10 health range and you've got like a Murky Dominate coming in, it's pretty much the end of the game. So very strong. These are your win conditions into everybody basically, because you can't go wide, you can't really go that tall too consistently, so Dominate is the way you get through these heroes. For the blues, we're playing 2 Intoxicating Shot because well, it's amazing. You'll mostly be pitching this, right? And so your opponent will be facing down an Intoxicating Shot. When you finally fire it in the second cycle, kind of end game time, that's when they're going to be low on life. And if they fully block out an Intoxicating Shot, then it's a 0 for 4 blue. That's a really good rate. And if they don't block it and they take some damage, well, you've got lots of traps, and so they're really taking a bit of a risk there. If you watch my round 3 stream game from the ProQuest Plus, I'll put the link in the description. I was on stream 3 times. Good way to see how the deck plays. I hit my opponent with an Intoxicating Shot. He went down to 3, and then I drew 3 traps, all the ones that kind of work on buff and go again, and I won the game. I was in a good spot anyway, but it's just an example of how risky it is to let Intoxicating Shot hit when you're low on life. Lastly, it's the one of Bolt and Shot. This is just here because it's a blue block 3 and an arrow. It's pretty shit, to be honest. I only put this in here because, as I said, last minute, 2 AM, not fully with it, and I realized I need more arrows in the deck, and so I took out a Plan for the Worst for a Bolt and Shot because I realized I probably wouldn't resolve Plan for the Worst twice in the game anyway. But yeah, that's the arrows. I probably wouldn't change the arrow lineup, to be honest. It's pretty efficient. You've just got to make sure that you are not blocking with your dominate arrows too much, because they are your win condition, and if you lose them, you are fatigable. And you just need to make sure that if you've got a hand with like 2 arrows, you don't want to block out with them and then just hope to draw another on the next turn. You want to keep one of those arrows, arsenal it, because if you draw no arrows in the next turn, that's horrible. However, if you arsenal an arrow and you do draw another arrow, then you just block with it, and it's basically the same thing. Next up, we have the buffs. I'm playing 2 copies of Premeditate, 2 copies of Seek and Destroy, 2 copies of Line It Up, and 2 copies of Deadeye. This is quite a limited buff count, but because I'm playing a low arrow count, I didn't want to clog on buffs, and I also didn't want too many 2 blocks in the deck. So I'm only playing the best 2 block buffs, which are, in my opinion, Premeditate and Seek and Destroy. Premeditate is like a 1 card 5, and Seek and Destroy gets your opponent off an arsenal, which is super important if you're playing a deck that relies on Dominate to win the game. Line It Up and Deadeye are both they're like the glue of the deck. They do everything. They can be your pitch card, they can block, and they'll buff your arrows. Deadeye is obviously the better one, because if you pair this with like a Stone Rain, you just end your opponent's turn on the spot. They got 2 cards to hit you back with. It's just really good disruption. You take their best card, and then if you pair it with a Seek and Destroy as well, like you're taking 2 cards from them whilst forcing through damage that they can't block. Line It Up is mostly just a yellow pump that blocks 3. However, there are some times where on a turn it is useful to be able to give 2 aim counters, because Barbed Castaway is a once a turn per turn effect, so it does come up. This buff count was perfect. I didn't feel like I needed more, because you just need to pitch like 2 of these with a Murky Water and a blue, and you know that's 13 damage in an endgame. That's going to kill most people, and you can do that multiple times in a game with Murky Water or Stone Rain. So yeah, this buff count I wouldn't change. It's very strong. Next up, we've got kind of like just the regular action cards. So obviously 2 Codex of Frailty, and well, I just said action cards, but 2 Sigil of Solace, it's not an action card, and the last one is Plan for the Worst. Codex of Frailty doesn't need any explaining. This gives you access to 2 more Murkies and or Stone Rains, which is very, very important if your opponent is trying to fatigue you. Sigil of Solace and Blitz is broken, because like you can gain like 33% of your life total back. It also triggers Riptide, which is very good, and it's another way to get an arrow into your arsenal face down and then flip it face up to give the aim counter, so very useful for that. And lastly, we've got Plan for the Worst, just as a one-off. I don't think you would resolve this more than once in Blitz, but it's a blue block 3 that if you need to see Collapsing Trap or Buzzsaw, you can, and also puts your opponent under Seek and Destroy. So if you want to play this and then follow up with the Dominate arrow, you're once again removing your opponent's arsenal, and so they can't de-react and block from hand as well. So very effective. Like that as a one-of. Alright, next up I got some real good spice for the deck, and in all honesty I think these 2 cards are, if the Dominate arrows are the reason to play this deck, or like make it viable, this is the way you make it, you kind of like take advantage of being able to play the deck, if that makes any sense. I don't even know if it does, but who cares. So 2 Oasis Respite and 2 Feign Death. These cards are insane in Barbed Castaway Riptide. So for a start, it shores up the Wizard matchups, which is very, very good, because Wizard is traditionally quite hard for Riptide. You just play Oasis and Feign Death and AB2 with your Spell Void 1 or 2 in the quiver, and you should feel invulnerable basically. And if you find your Dominate arrows early, you can just finish that game very quickly. The reason these are so good in Barbed Castaway Riptide is that if you play them on your opponent's turn, and say you pitch a yellow for it, you can trigger Riptide to reload, and then pay to give an aim counter, and then pay to load as well, if you've pitched like a blue. So you're getting value out of pitching a card in this scenario, because if it's your turn and you're paying a whole card to load with your bow or give an aim counter, that's just like a really bad rate. So this is a way to circumvent that, and it just lets you do some nice, cool, tricky things. As well, they work with your Tunic counter. Playing Feign Death as like a 1 card, like 13 or something, is godly. Yeah, they're just super strong cards. Feign Death can pitch as well. I didn't actually play any Wizard on the day, so it didn't come up too much, but there is a lot of Blaze around, a lot of Verdants, maybe 1 or 2 Acilios, who knows. So yeah, these cards pair so well with Barbed Castaway just because you can utilize any floating resources that you have from playing them, which you can't do in other Riptide decks, which is why I think Feign Death is so good in Barbed Castaway. I think in CC you play it as well. Super strong card, has so many like relevant matchups. It's, yeah, incredible. Alright, lastly, I've got the traps. everyone's favorite bit. So for the red traps, I'm playing 2 inertia traps, 2 frailty traps, 2 tar pit traps, 2 boulder traps, and then 1 of each legendary trap as well. Now I'm on a higher trap count because it lets me get murky water off sooner, and also, again, like if every trap here were to do damage, that's more than half of my opponent's life total gone just by me defending, let alone attacking, so very strong. Inertia trap is a must play in Barbed Castaway because, again, you're removing your opponent's arsenal, so they cannot use D-reacts to defend against your dominate attacks. It's super important. I can't really explain why, but whenever I take away inertia trap, I start losing so much more, and when I put it back in, I start winning again. It's not just because of D-reacts. The card just is really, really powerful, and because your deck is a bit slower than a lot of the decks in the format, you having 6 cards to play with because you got the double arsenal, and your opponent on a regular basis only having 4, is how you balance that out. Frailty trap. The frailty is pretty relevant in Blitz. It came up a lot, but to be honest, it's just the ping and the block 3 that I play it for. It's just a really easy trap to trigger. Tar Pit Trap is just broken. Absolutely insane card. It's so easy to trigger, has so many relevant matchups. It's a yellow, so you can pitch it. Godly. Same with Boulder Trap. Blitz has become power correct by the amount of armor block in the format, so let's take that away, which is what Boulder Trap does. And again, it helps your dominate arrows get through a lot sooner. If you play into like any warrior, even like Aurora, or any hero that buffs, they will not be getting value out of their armor. And next we have the 3 legendaries. They're all insane. I don't see why you wouldn't play them. They're just like a blue block 3 that has an insane ceiling. I'll do a quick tournament report as well. Round 1 I paired into a fucking Count Your Blessings Yoji. And I was just like, what the hell, man? Like, I said when I was building the deck, this is just to beat like the aggro decks and like the mid-range decks. If I pair into Yoji, you know what? YOLO. And of course round 1 I get paired into one. I set up such a nice pitch deck for it. At one point I set up like a 16 dominate murky waters, so I come in with my 16 dominate, and my opponent's like, what? He's got no armor left, no arsenal, block 3. He's like, oh, I guess I'm taking 13. I'm like, yeah. And then he goes to 15 life, and I'm like, okay, cool. It's like, great. So yeah, I lost that. The deck just physically cannot beat Count Your Blessings. I don't know why that card's legal. It sucks. It's not interesting. Please just ban it for good. It's just a bad card for the game. Anyway, moving on. Round 2 was against a Dory Prodigy, the weird Dory. She triggers every single trap, so I finished that game on quite comfortable life. I did get a Buzzsaw trap on a sword swing for 11, which was quite nice. So that's a highlight for that game. Game 3 was my stream game against Aurora. I high rolled the living hell in this game. I just found all my dominate arrows quickly, all my traps, and that was quite a comfortable win in the end. The deck doesn't often line up that well, but at least it lined up that well on stream. Round 4 was a stream game against Dash.io. Dash.io, you're just trying to fatigue, to be honest. It's quite easy to do with this deck. On the stream game, I was able to stop basically all the boom grenades hitting, and then I tar pitted and collapsing trapped after my opponent, I think, broke Goliath Gauntlet, so he couldn't use it, and he had 2 boom grenades up that were basically going to die again, so he just conceded. Round 5 was against a Data Doll. This game I fatigued the dash again, or is that even a dash? I don't know. I fatigued the Data Doll. The first like 6-7 cards that he banished were all attack actions, and when I saw that I was like, okay, I can definitely fatigue here. So I just kind of blocked out, took my time, and yeah, he just did not have enough damage in the deck to get me. And then round 6, the last round, this was against a Zen. Zen is by far the hardest matchup, I'd say, out of like the winnable ones, because he's got Zephyr Needles. Like, why? Why did they let Zen back into the format and then also not ban the Zephyr Needles? Like, I just don't understand it. So anyway, this game was not going well. I was behind on life for a very long time, but because I was like just constantly on the back foot, I also didn't attack him, and so like I just think he eventually, if you think about it, Zen's deck is like a quarter chi, so there's a very limited amount of damage in that deck that you can do. So if I'm just blocking out, maybe hitting him with a collapsing trap at a good time, I can get there. So it got to an end game scenario where I was on like 4 life, he was on 12, and I was just hitting with Endless over and over again, and then I get him down to like 2 life. He eventually blocks out the Endless, and time is called. It's his turn. He comes at me with the last Zephyr Needle, he's got a frailty token. I block with my tunic. He then grains that tips the scales for 1 to take it 1 over. I'm at 1 life, and I inertia trap him. And then I reload in my last stone rain, flip it up, and use it to kill him for a game. So super close game, but that did mean I was, man, I can't count, 5-1 in Swiss, which is way better than I ever expected to do, because again, this was just cooked up last minute while after a few intoxicating shots. And at this point, the hangover had started to kick in as well, so it was getting more difficult. However, I was just happy to make top cut. And then in top 8, I played the Riptide mirror. This was against a Death Dealer aggro Riptide, and I think that list is quite favoured into Barbed Castaway because you don't really have any special way to punish Death Dealer in the same way that you would in CC, because you can't fat deck and fatigue it out. So you need to get lucky with your traps lining up, which in this game my traps just didn't line up, and you also need to find your dominate arrows quite quickly. I didn't find my dominate arrows until quite late into the game, which meant I was already quite low on life, so I was having to block out a lot, and I just couldn't. I'd also given up my tunic, by the way, so that was really hard to keep a hand to give aim counters and fire. I did make a misplay. I arsenaled a murky water instead of a stone rain at one point, and I didn't draw any blues in the next hand. If I'd arsenaled the stone rain, I could have sent disruption at him, and that might have changed the outcome of the game, because he killed me with his last attack in deck by 1 life. So if that had happened and I'd had 1 more extra block in my last hand, it would have been a draw. But it wasn't. I died conclusively. But yeah, I think that's everything I gotta say. Riptide and Blitz, super fun deck to play. Barbed Castaway is really fun. There's some really intricate lines that you can take with this deck that's really, you know, just, I can't find a different word for fun, so I'll just say fun again. He's quite well positioned in the meta as well, besides Count Your Blessings decks that just swing the same hammer over and over again. You are pretty much good into everyone. Like, you're not heavily favoured, you just have lots of 50-50 matchups, and that's what Flesh and Blood should be. So yeah, I'll put the deck list in the link below. I'll also put a link to the stream below. The event, by the way, super well run. Shout out to everyone that ran the event. The streamers as well, like the casters, I should say. They're the ones that did Valencia, and just phenomenal job, so fun. All my opponents super nice as well. If you've not been traveling to like a Battle Hardened or ProQuest Plus, I could not recommend it more than I am currently recommending it. It's really good fun. Anyway, I'm off to get some sleep because I feel terrible. Have a good day.